Every big change in a person's life can usually be traced back to one single day, not a slow build over years. One day, something happens and a switch flips. The question is, what actually flips that switch, and why does it work for some people and fizzle out for almost everyone else? That is what we are going to break down today. Not vague inspiration, an actual sequence of internal shifts that shows up again and again right before someone's life visibly changes direction. 7 stages. And then the one action that determines whether any of it actually matters. Stay with me for the next 20 minutes, because by the end of this, you will know exactly what to look for the next time this moment shows up in your own life, and how to actually use it instead of letting it pass. One more thing before we start. None of these 7 stages require you to be a different kind of person than you already are. They are not personality traits some people have and others do not. They are a sequence available to anyone at almost any point in an ordinary week. The only real requirement is noticing when you are inside one of them, instead of letting it slide by unrecognized like just another Tuesday, stage 1. The moment of enough, you know the feeling. You have tolerated something for months, maybe years, a bad habit, a draining job, a relationship that quietly wears you down. And then one ordinary day, something small happens, and it suddenly becomes unbearable. Not because that particular thing was worse than everything before it, because you finally ran out of tolerance for it. The tank was already full. That last drop just happened to be the one that spilled over. Here is what most people get wrong about this moment. They treat it like a bad day to get through and forget as quickly as possible. But this feeling is not a malfunction. It is information. It is your own mind finally telling you the truth about something you have been quietly lying to yourself about for a long time. If you have ever felt that specific sharp wave of, "I cannot keep doing this," do not rush to calm yourself down and move on. Sit with it for a minute. Ask yourself plainly, what exactly am I done tolerating? Naming it precisely is what turns a passing mood into the start of an actual turning point. This is also the moment most people misuse by turning it into a complaint instead of a decision. Complaining about the same problem to the same people in the same way changes nothing. The moment only means something if it becomes the seed of stage 2. Picture someone who has been unhappy in their work for years, quietly telling themselves it is fine, it pays the bills, it could be worse. Then one unremarkable Tuesday, a small comment from a colleague, or a missed opportunity, or just an ordinary bad morning tips the scale. Suddenly, the same situation that was tolerable yesterday feels completely unbearable today. Nothing about the job actually changed overnight. What changed was the person's tolerance finally running out, and that is exactly the signal worth paying attention to instead of numbing away. The size of the trigger rarely matches the size of the shift it creates. A tiny, almost forgettable moment can be the one that finally breaks the pattern, while much larger difficulties sometimes get absorbed and tolerated for years. That mismatch confuses people. They assume a big change needs a big, dramatic cause. It usually does not. It just needs the tank to finally be full. Stay tuned. The moment of choosing this is the part nobody enjoys talking about, because it is genuinely uncomfortable. Once you have had enough, you still have to actually choose a direction. And choosing is often harder than doing. Most people get stuck right here, caught between 2 options, replaying the same decision at 2 in the morning for weeks at a time. They wait for the choice to become obvious, for all the fear to disappear first, for some sign that guarantees the outcome. That sign never comes. It cannot come because certainty is not available before you act, only after. Here is the only piece of advice that actually works for this stage. Stop trying to make the decision feel comfortable before you make it. It will not feel comfortable. Make it anyway. Comfort is not a prerequisite for a good decision. It is usually a consequence of having already made one and lived with it for a while. There is a strange relief that shows up the moment after a hard decision gets made, even before anything has actually changed. The knot in your stomach that came from indecision tends to loosen the second you finally pick a direction, because your mind stops burning energy on the argument and can finally spend it on the plan. If you are carrying around a decision you have been avoiding for weeks or months, understand that the discomfort of avoiding it is very likely larger over time than the discomfort of just making the call. Most people postpone decisions to protect themselves from short-term discomfort while quietly accepting a much larger, longer-term cost. One useful way to test whether you are actually stuck or just avoiding is to ask yourself this. If a close friend described exact situation to you and asked for advice, what would you tell them? Most people already know the answer to their own hardest decisions. What they are actually avoiding is not confusion about the right choice. It is the discomfort of admitting they already know it and have to act on it now. There is also a version of this stage that shows up as decision fatigue. Dozens of small unresolved choices piling up at once, none individually overwhelming, but together creating a constant background hum of stress. Clearing even a handful of those small decisions in one sitting tends to create a disproportionate sense of relief and clarity, simply because it frees up mental space that was quietly being spent on indecision all day, every day. Stage 3. The moment of wanting something enough to hurt, not a mild preference, not a nice to have. A want so specific and so strong that it pulls you out of bed early and keeps you working after everyone else has gone home. You cannot manufacture this feeling on command. And honestly, anyone who tells you they can hand it to you in a weekend course is overselling something. But you can absolutely put yourself in front of the things that tend to trigger it. A conversation with the right person at the right time. A book that says the one sentence you needed. Watching someone else finally do the thing you have spent years telling yourself you could not do. The mistake most people make here is staying closed off, guarded, unwilling to be moved by anything as a kind of self-protection. But that same wall that keeps out disappointment also keeps out this exact feeling. You cannot filter out only the painful experiences and still expect the powerful ones to get through. It does not work that way, so stay open to the moments that might trigger this in you. A hard conversation, an uncomfortable truth someone tells you, even a failure. Some of the strongest turning points in people's lives came directly out of their worst experiences, not their best ones, because pain has a way of clarifying what you actually want that comfort rarely does. There is an important distinction worth making here between wanting the outcome and wanting the process that gets you there. A lot of people say they want something, a healthier body, a successful business, a stronger relationship, while only really wanting the finished result, without any pull toward the daily, unglamorous work that actually produces it. The version of desire that changes lives is the one that includes wanting the process, not just admiring the outcome from a distance. If you only want the destination, the first difficult stretch of road will usually be enough to talk you out of continuing. Stage 4. The moment you stop negotiating. With yourself, this is the quiet decision that says, I am not stopping until this is done. Not I will try, not we will see how it goes. A flat, closed-door decision that removes quitting from the list of available options entirely. People who have pulled off something genuinely difficult almost always describe this exact moment, the point where giving up simply stopped being on the table. Not because they were more talented than everyone else, but because they had already decided in advance that this particular thing was going to get done regardless of how hard it got. This is different from motivation. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings come and go. This is closer to a standing decision that does not require you to feel like it every single day. On the days you do not feel like it, you do it anyway, because you already settled the question of whether you were doing it a long time ago. A simple way to build this for yourself. Pick the one goal that matters most to you right now, and write a single sentence that removes the option of quitting. Something like, I am doing this until it is done, regardless of how I feel on any given day. Read it back to yourself on the days it gets hard. That sentence, taken seriously, is worth more than most motivational content you will ever consume. It helps to understand what resolve is actually protecting you from. It is not protecting you from failure. Plenty of resolved people fail along the way and keep going anyway. What it protects you from is the much quieter danger of simply drifting away from something you once cared about. One small skipped day at a time, until one day you look up and realize you quietly abandoned it months ago without ever consciously deciding to. Resolve is what closes that particular door. Stage 5. Backing it up with a real plan here is where a lot of powerful moments quietly go to waste. Someone has the enough, the decision, the desire, and the resolve. And then they stop there, as if the feeling itself was the achievement. It is not. A strong feeling without a plan behind it is just an intense afternoon. It fades, and 6 months later nothing has actually changed, and the person is left wondering why nothing came of what felt, at the time, like such a major moment. The people who actually turn these moments into real change do one extra thing that everyone else skips. They immediately convert the feeling into a specific, concrete plan, while the feeling is still fresh, not a vague intention. An actual list, what will be done, by when, and what the very first step looks like, ideally something that can be started within the next 24 hours. A plan does not need to be complicated to work. It needs to exist, and it needs to survive contact with an ordinary Tuesday once the initial excitement has faded. That is the entire test, not whether the plan is impressive, whether it is specific enough to actually get followed once the emotional high has worn off. A good test for any plan is to imagine explaining it to a stranger in one sentence, without any vague words like more or better or eventually. Not I want to get healthier, but I am walking for 30 minutes every morning before checking my phone. Not I want to grow my channel, but I am publishing one new video every Tuesday for the next 12 weeks. The more specific the sentence, the more likely the plan survives the first difficult week, because there is no ambiguity left for your future, less motivated self to negotiate around. Stage 6. Giving the plan enough time to actually work here is something that quietly ends more good plans than any lack of effort ever does. Impatience. A plan gets built with real intention, gets followed for 2 or 3 weeks, produces no visible results yet, and gets abandoned right before it was about to start working. Almost nothing that matters shows results on a 2 or 3 week timeline. Skills, relationships, businesses, health, all of it moves in a pattern of long, quiet stretches where very little seems to be happening, followed by a period where things suddenly click into place all at once. The frustrating part is that from the inside, the quiet stretch and a genuinely failed plan look almost identical. The only way to tell them apart is time. This is why the plan from Stage 5 needs a built-in commitment to a minimum time frame before any judgment gets passed on whether it is working. 90 days is a reasonable starting point for most personal changes, not because 90 is a magic number, but because it is long enough to move past the initial motivation dip and long enough to generate real evidence one way or the other, instead of judging everything off the first uncomfortable week. Stage 7. Letting other people see the change there is a particular kind of power that comes from letting the people around you witness what you are doing, instead of quietly working on it in private and only revealing it once it is finished, or hiding it entirely in case it does not work out. This is uncomfortable for a lot of people because it means the possibility of visible failure. But that discomfort is exactly what makes it useful. When the people around you know what you are working toward, quitting quietly becomes a little harder, because it now involves an explanation you would rather not have to give. That small social friction is often enough to carry you through exactly the moments where private resolve alone tends to weaken. This does not mean announcing every plan to everyone you know. It means choosing 1 or 2 people you trust, telling them plainly what you are doing and why, and letting that small amount of accountability work in your favor, instead of avoiding it out of fear of how it might look if things do not go perfectly. There is a second benefit to this that people rarely mention. When you share what you are working on, honestly, you occasionally discover that someone close to you is quietly working towards something similar, or has already been through a version of the same struggle and has something useful to offer. None of that becomes available to you if the whole process stays hidden. Visibility, done selectively and on your own terms, tends to attract exactly the kind of support that private struggle never does. The piece that ties it all together. Action feeling something intensely and doing nothing about it is just an expensive form of entertainment. It feels productive in the moment. It is not. The whole chain, the enough, the decision, the desire, the resolve, the plan, only means something once it turns into a real action today, not eventually. This is the part that separates people who talk about change from people who actually experience it. Not intelligence, not luck. Simply whether the internal shift got converted into an external action before the feeling had time to fade. So if you are sitting with one of these moments right now, if something has finally become unbearable, if you are on the edge of a decision you have been avoiding, if something recently lit a fire in you that has not gone out yet, do not let today be the day you just felt it. Let today be the day you did something about it, even something small. Small, by the way, is completely fine here. The action does not need to be dramatic to count. Sending one message, writing down one plan, canceling one thing that no longer fits who you are trying to become. Waking up 30 minutes earlier tomorrow. The size of the action matters far less than the fact that it actually happened today. On the same day, the feeling was strong, instead of being pushed to some more convenient day that statistically tends to never actually arrive. If you look back at any moment in your own life that actually changed something, you will likely find the same pattern. Not a perfect plan, not ideal circumstances, not complete confidence. Just a feeling that got strong enough and a decision to act on it before it had the chance to fade. Closing, let's bring this together. Every real turning point tends to move through the same 7 stages. First, a moment of enough, where tolerance finally runs out. Second, a moment of choosing, where comfort has to be set aside in favor of an actual decision. Third, a moment of wanting something enough to hurt, which usually shows up when you least expect it and only if you stay open to it. Fourth, a moment of resolve, where quitting quietly leaves the list of options. Fifth, a real plan, built while the feeling is still fresh, that survives an ordinary day once the excitement fades. Sixth, enough patience to let that plan actually work before judging it. And seventh, enough openness to let the people around you see the change happening, instead of hiding it out of fear. None of this requires 40 years. It requires one day where frustration turns into a decision, the decision turns into desire, the desire turns into resolve, and the resolve turns into a real plan, real patience, and a real action. The next one of those days might be today. The only real question left is whether you are going to use it or let it pass like every other ordinary day before it.